The land wasn't much to look at: 5 windswept acres with an aging oak, a rusted gate, and a cabin barely holding itself upright. But it was mine. It had been mine since my grandfather left it to me with a firm handshake and a 2-word warning. Watch neighbors. I hadn't taken it seriously at first. After all, what harm could a few retirees and suburbanites do? Then came the HOA. Willow Ridge Estates was a luxury community that sprang up right next door, built on promises of gated peace and manicured perfection. The homeowners paid for symmetry: identical mailboxes, trimmed hedges, painted shutters. They hated anything that didn't match, and nothing clashed with their design. Dreams more than my land. I wasn't part of the HOA, never signed anything, never agreed to their rules. But that didn't stop their president, Karen Whitmore, from acting like I had. Karen was the kind of woman who wielded authority like a sword. Sharp voice, sharper heels. She treated the HOA rulebook like scripture, and used it to bully anyone she deemed unfit for the community aesthetic. I was public enemy number 1. She complained about everything. The color of my barn, the length of my grass. Once, she emailed a list of improvement suggestions for my property, ranging from installing a white picket fence to removing unsightly native shrubs. I ignored her. That only made her louder. She tried to find me. Didn't work. She tried to cite me. Also didn't work. I had no obligation to the HOA, and that made Karen furious. I could see it in her eyes every time she passed my gate and slowed to a crawl, inspecting my land like she was about to find buried bodies. I should have seen it coming. The signs were there, literally. It started with neon survey flags along my southern field, then white ribbons tied around trees. I thought maybe the county was running lines. But when I called the planning office, they had no projects listed, no permits, no surveys, nothing. I shrugged it off, assuming some landscaping crew had gotten lost. Then, 2 weeks later, I drove up for the weekend expecting my usual quiet escape and found chaos. Dozens of workers, trucks lined along the gravel drive, men unloading folding chairs and white tents, a woman in a headset barking orders near my oak tree, music playing, laughter, boxes of floral arrangements spilling onto the dirt in the center of it all. Holding a clipboard like it was a royal decree, stood Karen Whitmore. Her smile faded the moment she saw me. I parked hard and climbed out of the truck, stunned. What the hell is this? She blinked, then smiled too wide. Oh, Cole, you're early. Early for what? She cleared her throat. My niece is getting married tomorrow. We needed a natural setting, rustic and well, your land has potential. I stared at her. So you just decided to use it? It's one day, she said, as if that made it okay. The board discussed it and agreed it would be beneficial for community morale. It's practically unused space. I stepped closer. You're on my private property, Karen. No lease, no permission, no notice. She lifted her chin. We assumed you wouldn't mind. No one's ever here. Besides, think of it as a community contribution. You live off-grid, don't you? My fists clenched. This land's not part of your HOA. You don't get to vote on it like it's a lemonade stand. She gave a short, exasperated sigh. Cole, please don't be difficult. The mayor's coming. There are caterers, photographers, real professionals. This is an event people have paid for. If you make a scene, you'll look like the villain. That was the moment I understood something crucial about Karen. She wasn't just entitled, she was untouchable in her own mind. She'd already spun the story, painted herself as the generous neighbor and me as the unreasonable recluse. I walked the property slowly, letting the full weight of the violation sink in. Tables under my oak tree, a dance floor over Grandpa's wildflower patch, a cake stand sitting exactly where I used to set my campfire. Fine, I said quietly, turning back toward my truck. Karen beamed. I knew you'd come around. I didn't reply, but as I drove away, one thought repeated louder than the music playing behind me. This wasn't over. I didn't go home. Instead, I parked a mile down the road and waited. The sun dipped low as guests began arriving. Luxury SUVs, black sedans, even a party bus that had to back up twice before squeezing through the iron gates. They pulled onto my land like it was theirs, heels clicking, laughter rising, bow ties bouncing with every step. No one questioned where they were. Why would they? Karen had made it normal. She wore a silver dress that evening, sequined and smug, standing at the head of my pasture like she owned it, a microphone in hand, a champagne flute raised. I watched her from the tree line, silent and fuming. She'd turned my grandfather's field into a ballroom. The oak tree was draped in fairy lights. The barn where I'd learned to gut deer and patch tires was covered in silken wreaths. Music swelled from rented speakers. A photographer crouched low to capture the bride's tears. Not one of them knew they were trespassing, but she did. I slipped back to my cabin and retrieved the trail cams. I'd installed 3 on the property 2 months earlier, mostly to watch for coyotes. But they caught everything. Delivery trucks, catering vans, decorators holding tables, the DJ's SUV dragging equipment over my gravel. I transferred the footage to my laptop. Every face, every moment, all time-stamped and geolocated. I even got Karen on camera directing a crew to move the hay bales out of the background. They're ugly. I called the sheriff's office that night. The dispatcher said a deputy would come out, but warned it might not be immediate. Turns out Karen had already called them earlier preemptively, claimed I'd be causing a disturbance, and that there may be land use confusion. Her lie tied everything up in polite red tape. By the time a deputy knocked on my cabin door the next morning, the wedding was over, and the guests were long gone. He was young, nervous, kept checking his watch. "Mr. Granger," he said, "you're saying they held an event on your land without permission?" "That's exactly what I'm saying. Do you have proof?" I opened my laptop and showed him the footage. Karen in the field, the guests, the caterers, the fireworks that sparked over my fence line well past midnight. His jaw tightened. "That's a lot of people." 210, I said. I counted the plates. He hesitated. "This might be a civil matter." The county prosecutor. "No," I interrupted. "This is trespassing. She knew she had no right to use this land." He shifted uncomfortably. "Technically, yes, but unless there's damage, there is damage." I handed him photos of scorched grass, crushed wildflowers, and tire ruts cutting through the old cattle path. This field was my grandfather's pride. He planted every tree, every bush. Now look at it. The deputy gave a long sigh. "You'll probably need to sue." I nodded. "Then I will." I contacted a lawyer the next morning, old friend of my uncle's, known for making noise when it counted. We filed a cease and desist and prepared a civil lawsuit naming Karen personally for trespassing, property damage, and unauthorized commercial use of private land. While my attorney drafted the complaint, I did some digging of my own. I found the wedding planner's business page. Her gallery showcased high-end events at vineyards and estates. The most recent post, a carousel of polished wedding shots under my oak tree, captioned a magical evening in Willow Ridge. I messaged her politely and asked, "Did you have written permission from the landowner for that venue?" She replied 2 hours later, apologizing profusely. Said she had no idea it wasn't HOA land. Karen had told her everything was handled. She also emailed me her invoice for the wedding, $38,400. I added it to the evidence pile. That same night, I received an email from the HOA's general inbox, clearly not meant for me. Someone had accidentally CC'd my address on a thread between board members. Subject line: Karen's wedding. Legal exposure. Attached was a PDF from their insurance provider. They weren't covered. Karen had hosted the event as a personal favor, using HOA influence to secure the land. If sued, she'd be liable alone. It was better than I could have hoped. I called my lawyer. "Let's move." He smiled. "She won't know what hit her." The lawsuit hit Karen like a THUNDERCLAP. That she tried to stay composed at first, claimed she welcomed the opportunity to clarify matters. But I heard from a neighbor that she'd been seen pacing her driveway in slippers at 3 a.m., screaming into her Bluetooth headset. The HOA board had gone quiet, distancing themselves like rats scurrying from a burning ship. I wasn't surprised. Karen had ruled them with charm and intimidation for nearly a decade. But now, the same people she'd policed into silence were sharpening their knives. A week after she was served, I received a call from Linda Shaw, former vice president of the HOA and lifelong resident of Willow Ridge. She spoke in hushed tones, like we were part of some suburban spying. "Cole," she said, "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For not speaking up sooner. Karen's been misusing her position for years, finding people she didn't like, hosting private events with HOA funds. She told us your land was part of the community Greenbelt." I laughed. "Greenbelt? I have a cabin on it." She made it sound like it was just abandoned. She's about to find out how unabandoned it is. Linda offered to testify. So did 3 other board members. Apparently, Karen had misled them into approving event support funding catering deposits. Chair rentals will billed through the HOA budget. My lawyer added misappropriation of HOA funds to the civil complaint. Suddenly, this wasn't just trespassing. It was a scandal. News traveled fast through Willow Ridge. Some residents were furious, not because of the wedding but because their monthly dues had funded it. A private event, thrown for Karen's niece, with champagne and hors d'oeuvres they never tasted. An emergency board meeting was scheduled. I didn't attend, but someone slipped me a recording. It was brutal. Karen entered the room like a queen used to applause, but her smile evaporated when Linda stood up and read a list of expenses Karen had authorized without board approval totaling over $18,000. Another member demanded an internal audit. Karen stammered that she hadn't realized the land was private, that she thought Cole wouldn't care, and that everyone benefited from the wedding. "In a way, you mean everyone but the actual landowner," Linda fired back. They took a vote that night. Karen was removed as HOA president, unanimously the next morning. I found a note tucked under my cabin door. Handwritten, desperate, greater than Cole, "I know you're angry, but please consider dropping the suit. My family is already suffering. I didn't mean harm. It was meant to be beautiful. We can make this right without courts." Karen. I stared at the paper for a long time. Karen had finally come down from her throne, but now she was begging not for forgiveness, but for protection. She didn't want an apology. She wanted escape. I handed the note to my lawyer. 2 days later, we received her offer, $40,000 to settle. No admission of wrongdoing, No public statements. We rejected it. The damages were real and documented. Between land restoration, legal fees, and the wedding's commercial use, we valued the suit closer to $70,000. And the truth, I wasn't sure I even wanted a quiet settlement anymore. This wasn't just about my land. It was about how people like Karen operated without permission, without humility, convinced they were untouchable. So, we pushed forward. Her attorney fired back with counterclaims, claimed I'd deliberately withheld knowledge of the event, that I'd harbored resentment toward the HOA and used this as a personal vendetta. I smiled when I read that line, because they weren't wrong. This was personal. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. No jury, just a judge, 2 lawyers, and the woman who once ruled Willow Ridge with a clipboard and a condescending smile. Karen sat across from me, hair pulled tight, pearls neatly aligned, but her eyes betrayed the tremor beneath. My lawyer began with precision. He showed the judge the footage, Karen directing staff, instructing photographers, posing under the oak tree as if it were hers. He outlined the timeline, the lack of consent, the commercial use of private land, and the damages both ecological and financial. Then came the invoices, catering, lighting, DJ services, all on my soil. Karen's lawyer argued it was a misunderstanding, that she assumed the land was part of the HOA, that no malicious intent was involved. But that's the thing about trespassing. Intent doesn't erase impact. The judge didn't take long. He ruled in our favor, ordering Karen to pay $68,500 in damages. Her request to settle confidentially was denied. The judgment became public record, and so did her fall. News outlets picked up the story, first local, then regional. HOA president throws lavish wedding on private land, loses big in court. A few national real estate forums even shared it as a cautionary tale. My trail cam footage featured in a YouTube breakdown with over 1 million views. Karen vanished from Willow Ridge shortly after, sold her house for below market value, moved, rumor had it, to a modest condo in Arizona. Far from HOA politics and unforgiving oak trees, I thought that would be the end, but karma likes to linger. 2 months after the ruling, I received a letter, not from Karen but from a resident named Jacob Renner, a vet, quiet guy, lived 3 doors down from her old place. He thanked me, said his wife had been fined $250 for planting sunflowers in their yard. Karen had labeled them unauthorized vegetation. Their teenage daughter had been threatened with HOA violations for painting a mural on their backyard fence, one no one could even see from the road. My lawsuit hadn't just reclaimed my land, it had reclaimed theirs. The new HOA board voted to revise their charter, reduced penalties, increased homeowner voting rights. They even added a rule, no events over 50 people on any shared or adjacent property without written permission from all landowners. I wasn't part of their HOA, but they included me in that clause. As a courtesy, one sunny weekend I visited the field again. The grass had regrown. The oak tree, freed from the tangle of lights, stood quiet and proud. I set up a folding chair beneath it, cracked open a cold drink, and listened to nothing but wind and cicadas. For a moment I thought about Karen, about how people like her build was not to protect, but to control. She saw my land as unused, unclaimed, and unimportant, because in her world, ownership meant conformity, but land doesn't forget who loves it, and neither does justice. I walked back to the cabin and paused to read the new sign I'd installed on the gate. Private land trespassers will be documented and invoiced. In honor of Karen, I added a second camera to capture reactions, because karma, she doesn't knock, she records.